which is to make sure everyone has a chance to vote. So our election protection efforts are not along the lines of challenging voters, eliminating voters. Everybody's welcome to vote in this county, and everybody that's eligible to vote should be able to easily and safely, which fortunately in Colorado we have the ability to do that. I mean, the best way to vote is get that mail ballot, put it in the postal service if you want, but save 57 cents and go to a drop box and drop it off well before Election Day. You can track your ballot and find out when it's been received, when it's been counted, and you know you're good. So that's the easiest way to do things, and that's what over 95% of voters in Colorado do in any given election. I think the primary was something like 97.5% of the voters voted by mail or early voting. So if you have a problem with your ballot, whatever that may be, no judgment, right? You know, dog ate it, you lost it, you filled out the wrong blank on judge number 4, and you want to correct it. You can go into the voter service centers during the early vote period, which starts basically 10 days prior to Election Day, and up through Election Day, 7 p.m., and get another ballot and correct your vote. So, or if you want to, you know, I grew up in Minnesota, which has the highest voter turnout of any state in the country. Colorado's number 2, so, but I'm used to voting. I mean, my culture is you vote, you know. I mean, when I was a kid, my dad would take me in to vote with him into the booth, and I mentioned I was raised Catholic. There's a lot of ceremonies and mysteries in the Catholic Church, right? Well, it's the same in elections in a lot of ways. It was really kind of a spiritual process, and I think that's something that we need to hold on to. So some of you that are used to that in-person voting, you can get your mail ballot, you can fill it out in the luxury of your own home, and you can walk it into a VSPC on Election Day or before just to have that experience of handing it in, plus then you get the little sticker, of course, which is nice too. Let me say a couple things about the voting process in Colorado. First of all, well, in El Paso County, I think I want to really praise the election department in this county and our county clerk for doing really good work in terms of making voting accessible, fair, open, dealing with, I think the last 2 to 4 years, they've been dealing with unbelievable threats to our system. And there's been other threats to all kinds of election workers around Colorado and elsewhere. I'm not saying specifically to our elections department, but they get constant complaints and just questions that have no purpose, that they have to spend staff time and your tax dollars on fixing. And they've been great. I mean, we've worked with them. I've been doing election protection for the last 4 elections, I guess, and every one of them, going back to the days of Wayne Williams, has been, you know, good service from our elections department. So I want to stress the nonpartisan nature of good elections. Democrats can't do it by ourselves. Republicans can't do it by themselves, and independents. So we need to cooperate, and I think that's working well here. Now, part of the system in Colorado is based on laws, right? And our voting laws are some of the best in the country in terms of making it easy and safe to vote, making sure there's no problems with counts, making sure recounts, if we need them, come up, like Judi said, within 5 votes or 2 votes of the original count in a county of 200,000 voters. So that's important. Just a thing, I'm just going to mention this is not partisan in any way, but if you look at the election laws, the numbers on election laws that have been passed to basically create the system we have in Colorado, you'll see 13 numbers, which means legislative session 2013, 15 numbers, 22 and 21 numbers, and just coincidentally, Democrats were in control of the state house, the state senate, and the governorship during those times. So it's nonpartisan, but that's just who happened to pass the laws, I'm just saying. And then I think this election also, if you look at the bigger picture, is really an attack on democracy. So I'm a Democrat. I hope Democratic candidates win. What concerns me more, though, is not so much who wins, but what's this process going to look like. So, we're in the midst of a national attack on democracy that we have not seen since I mean, there's ebbs and flows in our democracy. It started out only, I think, landed white men could vote, and things have evolved to the point where my wife's grandmother turned 21 on the day that the Constitution allowed women to vote. I personally voted first in 1972, which was the year that 18-year-old voting was passed, and I was 18 years old. So things have evolved, but they've also devolved too. So with Jim Crow and the limits in the South that we saw in other states in the 60s, 50s, 60s, into the 70s, there's been very serious attempts to erode our democracy and attack it. And I think that's what we're in the midst of now. So this is an attack that the 2022 election is only part of. This is pregame. The real attack is going to come in 2024, because the people that we've seen in operation, like Judi mentioned here, are a nationwide network funded by large funders, and their goal is they're probing. They want to see where they can disrupt elections. So this thing of these useless recounts, that's all part of a process where they're probing to see where the weaknesses are. Their goal is to disrupt enough elections in 2024 in enough states that states will not be able to certify electoral college votes, which in many of those states will then kick back to the state legislators, who will be able to elect their own electors who will support whatever candidate those state legislatures want to have in office. So what happened in 2020 in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona, some of those states, is nothing compared to what's going to happen. So they're probing things here in Colorado. I think they'll be very frustrated because our system is good, our election workers are fair, Republican or Democrat or otherwise. But they're going to keep trying, and they're going to screw up the system, and they're going to intimidate voters. We have no idea what's going to happen in terms of voter intimidation in 2022. I think we'll see significant at VSPCs, at mail drop box locations, those sorts of things, significant attempts to disrupt voting. I don't know what those are going to be. Is it going to be video taping people dropping off their mail ballots? Is it going to be, telling people that, hey, if you have a traffic ticket and you got a warrant for that, you better not vote because they'll arrest you? I mean, there's all kinds of strategies they'll pursue, including after the vote, trying to shut down the election. So we'll see recounts and recounts and recounts in 2022 here, I'm sure. I think that the problem is, though, if people can vote by mail ballot, there's not a whole lot they can do to intimidate voters, I mean, unless they're going to stand between you and your mailbox. I don't, maybe they will, who knows? But I think, we need to be vigilant. In terms of what the Democratic Party does statewide, we have a statewide election protection network. Coordinated through the Colorado Democratic Party. I'm the county council, and most of the major counties have county councils in place, and we're volunteers. We're not paid by any means. And it's a network so that as complaints come in, or as questions come in, and I think I handle, as a county council, a lot of just questions about, well, my ballot, I didn't get my ballot, what should I do, those sorts of things. Perfectly fine to handle those, but we have a statewide network, so if problems come up in voting locations, and we basically report every problem we see, and then the state keeps track, and if they're seeing trends, or the score system, which is the registration system, goes down in 5 counties in the state all at the same time, then they'll be able to address those issues. Sometimes lawsuits, most likely just it's a matter of a complicated system, has some bugs in it, and they're easily corrected problems. So we track what's going on there. I've seen very little real voter harassment. We had an incident in 2020 in Manitou where this election watcher, not a Democratic election watcher, but another party, was challenging voters' citizenship. Just, I don't know on what basis. That's not permitted. And our county clerk, the way I heard that was resolved, was the county clerk, and she was also infringing on the space, was too close to where she should be. So the county clerk went out and put some tape on the floor and told her she needed to stay in that circle and be quiet. or she is out. So there is stuff like that, but I don't know what we'll see this time. I think if you, two plugs I want to say. First of all, if you have any interest in being an election judge, and that's not an election watcher, an election judge are the Democrats, Republicans, or independents that actually process and work for the county. It's a paid position. Process the ballots, pick up ballots from drop boxes, obviously work in the VSPCs on election day and for early voting. If you have any interest in doing that, you can still contact the county clerk's office and find out how to do that. If you happen to be a Democrat that has an interest in that, we'll give you a phone number of somebody to talk to connect you up. Each party needs to approve their election judge roster. If you don't have an interest in doing that, but you'd like to participate in election watching, poll watching, talk to me. You can also call the same Democratic Party number, and we can connect you up with that too. So, I think that's all I have to say. What a poll watcher does? Okay. Well, if you're a poll watcher, you watch. It's pretty easy. Again, there's different philosophies. Our training is very. I just went through the election watcher training. It hasn't changed much. The laws changed a little bit. For instance, you can't have open carry weapons within 100 feet of a polling location now, which is a innovation. Our watchers have never done that. There has been some of that. But if you're a poll watcher doing the job you're supposed to, you're basically assigned to a polling location. And then we have other watchers that are in the count rooms and that sort of thing. But you're assigned to a polling location over the early vote and election day period, and you see what's going on. You report any problems, whatever those might be. And you have a system, so you get training to do this, so it's about a 90-minute training. And a system where so you call in, and if you have questions or concerns, then somebody in the boiler room in Denver handles that, and they may kick it down to me and send me out to a location. Or we have also flying squads, which they fly around. It's I just recruited somebody for our flying squad. She said, "I'll make sure my broom's working that day." Broomstick's working that day. So it's pairs of two, one lawyer and one community leader that are in cars, and they're just circulating in the county. And if something happens at a location, we send them out there. And it used to be a lawyer and a preacher, so it was called the God Squad. But we're having trouble recruiting preachers, so now it's a flying squad. So anyway, when you're doing election watching, you're part of a network. You have an assigned shift. If you are only available, you have to commit at least half a day to this process, and plus the training. But if you want to do more than that, we have election watchers that do several days throughout the election period. You get training, and you got a good support network. It's pretty interesting. I think it's very interesting sitting in polling locations. It borders between being very interesting and incredibly boring. But it's really neat to watch people vote. It still has that spiritual aspect, I think, to it. For a lot of folks, and I think that's important. And talking about God being in our world, I think that's an expression of that. Voting is a holy process, and we're trying to preserve that. Now, we're not, as Democrats, we're not adverse to a little street fighting if we need to on certain things. But in terms of the voting process, we just want to make sure everybody in this county votes. And if you don't vote with us, fine. Election day a few years ago, this woman needed a ride to the polls, and it was a long story. I got involved in it, and I spent like 2 hours. We finally got her a ride, and then as she was getting into the car, she basically said something. I can't remember what, but I was pretty clear she was going to vote Republican. She thanked me, but I thought, okay, I just spent 2 hours, but then I'm like, well, this is what it's about, right? So.
About being a poll watcher, I've done that, and as Mike said, it's can get kind of boring, but there are times where different things come up. But basically, what you're doing is watching, making sure if you start to see a lot of people being turned away, or say, "Hey, were you able to cast your ballot?" No, just trying to make sure that as many people as possible can vote. And one of the things I wanted to say is I, like Mike, really feel that we're so lucky in this county. our election department workers, what I saw in the 2 different locations I was in, and that was in the southeast part of our community, they really work hard to make sure everybody gets to vote. Okay, can you go home and find this? Can you bring me this? Just anything to try to be sure that they can cast their vote. And the other thing that was helpful is being a poll watcher. I remember, I'm trying to remember what election, probably one of the Obama ones, where it was really crowded at one of the locations, and we were having hardly anything going on in ours. And so they were able to tell people, yeah, if you can get down to, I think it was Sand Creek was overwhelmed at the library, and so, hey, if you can get down to this church down in the southeast, you can get through the lines quicker. So, you know, it's always just I think, a good feeling to be part of that and make sure people can vote. And then as far as an election judge, we are still short Democratic Party election judges. So if you want to be, and you need to be a Democrat because the Democratic Party vets and okays election judges for them, and the Republican Party does the same. The process for unaffiliated is a little different. But if you want to be a Democratic Party election judge, you can email our office and put election judge in the subject line, or see me afterwards, and I have little cards with all the information on it for the Democratic Party. Same if you want to be a poll watcher for the Democratic Party. Send them an email. That'll be the quickest. And put in poll watcher, and they'll be sure to be looking for those. For the Republican Party, go to their website. On this piece of paper, I have their website and their phone number. I don't know for sure what all their process is, but you can certainly contact them. Normally, there are plenty of Republican election judges, but you might check with them if they're still taking them. Unaffiliated, you need to go to the county clerk's website, and that they will then take you through a process for that. And when I was an election judge in the last election, there was even someone from the Constitutional Party who was one of the election judges. So I will be an election judge again this year, and had to commit because I'm doing signature verification, and so I had to commit from the 24th of October through the 11th of November. You just cancel everything else in your life because it's all different times that you're called in to sit and work on signature verification. And there's always 2 people working together from different parties so that you're both, you know, looking at the signature in question and trying to make a decision and what to do with it. The other thing is our system has, you know, a very strong process for what they call curing your ballot. So if there is some mistake with your ballot, you are notified. That's why it's important to have a phone number when you've registered to vote, an email address, and then they will send you a letter. But they are even calling people to say, here's an issue with your ballot, can you come in and get it fixed, or we can send you this in the mail, and you have a certain time limit to do that. So as Mike said, I think we work really hard here in Colorado to get as many people voting as we possibly can. I guess any questions, comments?
So it's about 2.5 weeks commitment for a judge?
Well, for this particular type of judge, other judges
Yeah.
are staggered.
Yeah, I was going to ask what the time commitment
So
was for
if
these
you don't
different
have 2
positions.
weeks to commit, there are other options, yeah. I mean, so.
I've been waiting to hear from them. I filled out an application online, sent it to El Paso County, but I'm going to talk to you afterwards because I really want to do something. A couple years ago, I was a ballot runner, and my eyes were just like, I really could not believe how tight everything is at the election department. It was really impressive, and it really felt good to see that and know what goes on behind closed doors. People work very hard. I'm writing letters this year for Vote Forward, and one of my problems when I write the letter is there's so many reasons to vote, and that's one thing you're supposed to say in the letter, that I find it hard to be short.
So, yeah, so if you have a particular question about getting called to be an election judge, yeah, talk to us. The other issue, though, here is, as you mentioned, the tight system we have. These disruptors, they're spewing information like it's a crooked system, it's so disorganized, it's blah, blah, blah. I don't know if they believe it or not. That's not true. I think a lot of them don't believe it. They've been sitting in these rooms. They've been watching the same system. But if you're going to disrupt an election, again, the purpose is not to make the system better. The purpose is to shut the system down. And I'm talking about democracy. So, but the reality is, I think in most places, now I can't speak for other states or even other cities, but I think we have good systems run by good people with remarkable double checking and accountability throughout the system, from picking up those ballots in the drop boxes. There's got to be a Republican and Democratic judge watching each other. I mean, usually they cooperate just fine. Right. I don't know who paid for the gas, but I would say the Republicans should pay for the gas, but that's just me. I have an electric car, so it's not an issue. Yes, ma'am. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. So I just had a question. Is there any sort of corrective action that's planned to sort of moderate that amount of disruption, knowing that you're going to have this many recounts? Is there some sort of thing, plans afoot to reduce the amount of disruption while still allowing them to view what's going on? Or is it just going to be more of the same?
Well, we have watchers watching too, so if there's disruptions, the system the Democratic Party has is in place throughout. So from voting to counting to the recounts, the whole deal. We just met with the county clerk this week, and they're very aware of these issues. There's laws and regulations in place. One factor in Colorado is even if a county doesn't certify an election result, the Secretary of State has the authority to certify it on behalf of the county. So there's checks and balances in place. That's it.
My question is there any way to sort of reduce the amount of yelling, screaming, signs, that kind of thing during the recount, or is there no way to do that?
Again, they can do what the law allows. And they can't. I mean, it's an open process. So part of what Judi was talking about is the count area in the elections department has this big window, and the public can observe at any point in the process. Don't have to be certified as anything. So their public was out there observing and putting signs in their hair or whatever. Sounds like stuff I used to do in college, but for a different side of these issues. It's kind of fun. But yeah, I mean, it's a battle. I mean, you're right. I think that it would be nice if we could eliminate some of that stuff, but it's a democracy. It's open, too. So there's a balance here, That's all I can say.
I just wanted to add some things. I'm with the League of Women Voters, and Judi, I don't know whether you have Vote 411 on your list there, but if they want the candidates' information on issues, there's a website that the League sponsors called vote411.org, and they've sent out questions to all the candidates to get their input on issues. So that helps sometimes make decisions, and I think they'll have something on ballot issues also.
And Molly is really a very, very hardworking citizen with League of Women Voters and also for the Democratic Party. So thank you, Molly.
I'd like to take you to a philosophical level for a minute. I have my own thoughts about why they are doing this, but I'm wondering if the Democratic Election Defense Council has sort of a take on why is there a portion of our citizenry who are purposefully doing things that are intended to take advantage of discrepancies in the law, etc., in order to disenfranchise people. Why are people doing this?
Well, I think I've kind of alluded to it. I mean, why is Putin in power in Russia? You know, why are dictatorships on the rise around the world? It's because people in these countries allow it to happen. And then you get certain leaders that throw out ideas that are absolute lies about a process so that they can remain in power, and a certain percentage of people believe that for whatever reason, whether it's their social media feeds or whatever. But I think at the top of these efforts, and they're organized efforts, it's not just like a bunch of random crazies running around doing stuff. Part of that is true, but there's very closely orchestrated and organized efforts to disrupt democracy, which can then result in elections being thrown to state legislatures, to the courts, and there's a Supreme Court decision coming up in terms of the power of legislatures to certify elections, which will apply in 2024. That decision is going to be heard in the next Supreme Court session. That would essentially, or could essentially, result in every state legislature being able to override the vote of citizens for president and put forth their own slate of electors. So that's a scary thing there. That is just terrifying to me. So I think that's it. It's dictatorship. It's anti-democracy. It's vulnerable, gullible people, and maybe well-meaning that don't see what's going on. There's racism in it. There's prejudice against certain blocks of voters. Blocks of our citizens shouldn't have the say that they're having. It gets wound up in law and order. God's decision on God's will on abortion, all kinds of other things. I got a Republican friend that voted for Trump, of course, and then a couple years after the election, I'm talking to him, and Trump was doing some fairly unusual things right from the start. And this guy's he's a mediator colleague of mine. He's reasonable, and I said, Mark, what do you think? What do you think of Trump? And he goes, oh God, that guy's crazy. He's out of his mind. I thought, well, you voted for him, right? And he goes, yeah, I'll vote for him again. We're getting a Supreme Court that we need. So that's it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say is, this idea of a dictatorship is power and being able to enforce your values, your beliefs, religious or not. I was out walking yesterday, knocking on doors of voters for two candidates, and one of the gentlemen that was talking to me was saying he just thinks we need to have prayer in school, and the problem with the country is, we don't pray in school anymore, and we don't believe in God. And I said, well, that's interesting. Would it be okay if one day they'd read from the Bible, and the next day they'd read from the Quran, and then maybe from the Torah, and then you could have, and he just went, and that was the end of that conversation. But so it's to kind of protect and reinforce, I think it's a lot of fear that they're going to lose power and that their values, yeah. So that's part of it.
So I have a follow-up to Bill's question. Who is watching the watchers? So you may have seen the New York Times editorial on our equinox and the documentary that was in the Times just slightly earlier in the week that was reviewing the voter integrity laws that were designed to suppress the vote. And essentially, the editorial said, yeah, that's really not the biggest problem. The biggest problem is the disruption that is anticipated. It's a clearly articulated strategy by Steve Bannon to have poll watchers and others filing affidavits for what they perceive based on misperception or gut feeling or whatever example would be that person didn't look like a citizen or what have you, and those affidavits then being immediately collected by a stable of lawyers that they have lined up that are designed to delay certification. So anyway, the Times editorial is pretty lengthy and informative on this particular strategic vision, but I'm wondering what can be done about this? Is this just part of our election law, a vulnerability in the election law? If poll watchers are inclined to pursue this sort of meritless accusations, is that just a kind of vulnerability that we're just going to have to, there's nothing that can be done to stop those unwarranted accusations?
Well, I mentioned the New York Times Sunday edition is my new religion, right? So I think I read that that editorial, and they've made some real good points. But you got to put, I mean, I have to put it in the context of Colorado and good laws, and Colorado isn't the only state with good laws. So, for example, they were referencing people that were challenging bunches of voters at a time, like lists of voters and that sort of thing. You can't do that in Colorado. You have to individually challenge a voter. You have to be a resident of the precinct the voter resides in. It's a difficult process. You have to fill out a big form. You know, I mean, it allows for the challenging of voters, but it really prohibits that kind of mass challenge issue. So who's watching the watchers are the watchers. I mean, we're watching the watchers that are watching the other watchers. I mean, you know, it's everybody has a right, all the parties and unaffiliateds have a right to have watchers present throughout the process. We have laws that are enforced either because of watchers complaining or most likely because the election judges and in the system are seeing the problem and they enforce it, you know. If you have other states, though, like Texas, like I got some friends in Wisconsin, you know, some of these voter laws are not the same as here by any means. So they allow mass challenges. They can get lists of voters and challenge them. You know, any people with certain last names can fit into that list. So that's a real issue there. Unfortunately, I think the states that allow that sort of thing are going to be the hinge for the 2024 presidential election in a lot of ways, maybe or maybe not. So part of the process is to have good laws, because if you have election watchers and the laws are bad, it doesn't really matter. You know, it's going to be disrupted. Yeah.
All right, it's almost noon, so I'm going to allow one more question before we go for today, and I'd like to, in advance, thank you very much. We've got Judi.
I think we also have to acknowledge that it's really hard to be a very informed voter. And one of the things that the League tries to do is in their Facebook page, they try to make people aware of debates and opportunities to hear candidates. And the one that I know that's coming up almost immediately is this coming Tuesday night at the City Auditorium. The Senate candidates for Colorado for Districts 12 and 18 will be there on both sides, so that's an opportunity to hear that. In today's Gazette, amazingly, there were two sides of one of the elections where the candidates had freedom to say what they wanted to say. So there are a lot of different ways to keep informed, but it is a considerable amount of work to do that. So I think we need to acknowledge that as well.
Can I make one plug? I served on the Colorado statewide court evaluation committee that evaluates judges, Judicial Performance Commission. And our Judicial Performance Commissions write very good evaluations of judges based on a 360 evaluation process that's unbelievably complicated and exact and complex. And if you want to know about judges and how you're going to vote on judges, just go to the Blue Book. There's a very good review of those judges. Because one thing we found in the last election cycle was ballots were not getting in as fast as we were kind of figuring they would. And a lot of people, they fill out all their ballot, but then they get to these 32 judges you got to vote for, and it's like, oh, God. And some people just skip voting on judges, which I don't think is good. But other people are like, I need to research all this, and they go online and they're looking up these judges. Just go to that blue book. The league also has very good resources for information on that and ballot initiatives you might not understand. Educate yourselves and vote early as possible.
Yes, if you vote early, you won't get all those annoying phone calls from all the different candidates. Yeah, right from the two of us. Okay, this yellow sheet has some resources. It has Democratic Party information, Republican Party, Citizens Project, which, their mission is a voice that empowers and challenges our entire community to embrace equity, inclusion, and justice. It's nonpartisan and aligns a lot with our Just Peace church, but they have a lot of things going on, and they are doing a campaign to get out the vote and writing postcards and calling, so they're another good contact. So here's this that has information, and then these little cards are just for the Democratic Party, but has all the contact information if you want to be a poll watcher or an election judge. Okay, so I'd like to talk with any of you that want to do that. Make sure you get your info in, because we really need you. So thank you. Thanks for being here.